KCAA.
Are you ready for a new experience? To see life from another point of view? New hope, new expression, new joy. This is your radio hour. Welcome to Viewpoint with Father John.
And welcome, friends. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. By the way, you can follow us on Instagram or Facebook, either one or both of them if you like. Just look for Viewpoint with Father John, and you can click like on those pages, and you'll see what's going on with the show. You can also send me messages through those platforms, and I do enjoy hearing from you. Also, if you miss an episode, you can go to YouTube and just put in the search bar, Viewpoint with Father John, KCAA, and you'll get all of our past shows. This month is our 4-year mark. Can't believe it. It just really blows me away. I thought I'd be here for less than a season. Here we are. I guess they haven't figured out how to unlock the door yet. They can't get in the studio where I am. So happy birthday to us for 4 years. And Frank's been with us for 2 of those years. And it's been a wonderful relationship back and forth, good friendship here. By the way, you can also follow me on Twitter at Father John Reed. Father is spelled out, and Reed is the proper R-E-I-D, which is the Irish. And remember, in case you weren't told growing up, there's only 2 kinds of people in the world, Irish and those that wish they were. I will admit I'm taking a little bit of little digression here. Some Irish pride that some Irish fishermen stared down the Russians in the Black Sea and made the Russian Navy back off because they do their fishing in this area, and they made it real clear they don't care if the Russians come doing the live fire, they're not moving. And there's things that they could do that can disable those big boats with, oops, a net fell. And so they met with the Russians. The Russians tried to lie about what happened. Well, fishermen was smart enough to go on television when they came out of the meeting to say what was said. The bottom line is the Navy made a deal, the Russian Navy made a deal so that the Irish can do their fishing where they do their fishing every year. And I like the fact that just a small group of Irish, I'll tell you what, it's why God made whiskey so he wouldn't take over the world. So my brothers from Ireland, attaboy, and Sinn Féin, which means ourselves alone in Gaelic. All of God's children are endowed with extraordinary purpose and ability. I'm on a quest to help as many as possible in fully realizing their divinely inspired potential. Disposing of false narrative and embracing genuineness of inspires clarity of purpose. My role is to help overcome self-imposed limitations in realizing one's spiritual potential. And folks, I'd like to remind you that the best pharmacy in the Inland Empire and, well, probably the West Coast would be Claremont Pharmacy. The owner is Dr. Nikki Ho. That's where I get all my pharmaceutical supplies. And they have not only the vaccines, but the boosters. If you need to get your boosters, they took care of my booster. And Nikki is so good at giving these shots, I didn't even feel the needle go in. She's that good. She handles my flu and my pneumonia shots, everything. She's just really good. But more important, these are really sweet people. They care about the people who come there, and they make sure that everything is done right so you have the best health you can have. Now, if you want a really good time, you want to have LakesideDJServices.com do your party. If it's a wedding, if it's a bar mitzvah, if it's a quinceañera, whatever it is you're going to do, it will be better if you have Frank doing this, your music. And you all know Frank, he's our engineer for this show, so you know he is really good at what he does. So again, that's LakesideDJServices.com. And tell him you heard about him on this show. I know he'll love to hear that. And finally, but not least, my friend Glenn Kirshner with Justice Matters on YouTube. Particularly with all the stuff we're trying to navigate legally these days, he's a really great source to find out what's going on. And you can become a part of Team Justice if you like. You can see I have my Team Justice sticker on my computer, those watching on YouTube. Because I support what he's doing, because I like someone who has integrity and says it like it is, and not says what's politically correct. And that's my buddy Glenn, who is a real stand-up guy. Tonight, my guest is me, and I'm going to use multiple personalities. I'm kidding. I want to take this opportunity to talk about spiritual awakening. And sometimes I think we confuse spiritual experience with spiritual awakening. They're two different things. They sound a lot alike, but they are actually different from one another. And so I want to talk a little bit about that tonight. As I get my sip of water. No, that's not holy water I'm drinking, but, in case you're wondering with what we're talking about tonight. Some of you know I'm a big fan of Anthony DeMello. Anthony DeMello was a Jesuit priest, entered the Society of Jesuits at age 17. He grew up in India, and he was one of the best retreat masters they ever had. And he died, unfortunately, at a rather young age. And he would combine Christian stories, Buddhist stories, and Hindu stories, and show what we have in common all together, because kids, we have a lot more in common than we have different. And I always got a lot out of his writings. And so this is from the book with his name. That's the title of the book, is Anthony DeMello. And it says, writings selected with an introduction by William Dyke, who's also a Jesuit. And the series is a Modern Spiritual Master series, so I really recommend that series. There's good stuff there. And just about everything that Father DeMello has written, I have really glommed onto, because there's so much there. Sort of like Richard Rohr. Richard Rohr is a great writer as well. Just a personal note, when St. Paul's Press published my book, Close Your Eyes So You Can See Me, I was greatly honored when the editing board said to me that my writing reminded them of Anthony DeMello. So I could not receive a greater compliment, and I thank God for that, because God did the writing, I just held the pen. So this is on awareness, and this section is called On Waking Up. And some of you have heard me read this before, but I think it's perfect for what we're going into. Excuse me, I got a little bit of sniffles here. Spirituality means waking up. Most people, even though they don't know it, are asleep. They are born asleep. They live asleep. They marry in their sleep. They breed children in their sleep. They die in their sleep without ever waking up. They never understand the loveliness and the beauty of this thing we call human existence. All mystics, Catholic, Christian, non-Christian, no matter what their theology, no matter what their religion, are unanimous on one thing: that all is well. All is well. Though everything is a mess, all is well. Strange paradox, to be sure. But tragically, most people never get to see that all is well, because they are asleep. They are having a nightmare. Waking up is unpleasant, You are nice and comfortable in bed. It's irritating to be woken up. That's the reason the wise guru, that's why the wise guru will not attempt to wake people up. I hope I'm going to be wise here and make no attempt whatsoever to wake you up if you're asleep. It is really none of my business, even though I say to you at times, wake up. My business is to do my thing, to dance my dance. If you profit from it, fine. If you don't, too bad. As the Arabs say, the nature of the rain is the same, but it makes thorns grow in the marshes, and flowers in the gardens. So tonight, let's talk about spiritual awakening and what it is to wake up, opposed to just having a spiritual experience. And I don't mean to downplay having a spiritual experience, because that's very important too. Excuse me, I should have taken something for sciences tonight. Good Lord. We're having all these winds in California, for those of you who are not around the Inland Empire, and it gets my hay fever going up, and I didn't even know we had hay in the area. So, sorry, bad joke. So, spiritual experience can be very emotional. It can be very uplifting. In fact, and I'm going to say something that some people disagree with, surprise, but I have to call it as I see it. Otherwise, I have no business behind this microphone. And that is when they do the altar calls at funerals, and people go up to be quote unquote saved. That's a spiritual experience. It's an emotional thing, and it could really feel good. That's not a spiritual awakening. Okay, it's in a way it's kind of making a deal with God, and this deal was already made 2,000 years ago. I mean, we were all saved at the same time when Jesus came to earth here, and that's not just my words. That's 2,000 years of traditional church that will tell you that. Look it up. You'll find out I'm not a heretic, that I'm giving you I guess I could say the gospel truth on that one. I've always wanted to say that. So that's a spiritual experience. Or you have something really powerful happen in your life. Sometimes at the birth of a baby or a baptism, you can have a spiritual experience. Some people who deal with addiction, when they get relief from that addiction, have a spiritual experience because it feels so good inside. And at that moment, they feel the connection with God. But it's fleeting. Nothing wrong with it. Spiritual experiences are very important. I'm not discounting that in one way or another. I am grateful for spiritual experiences. People who were on a retreat with me 2 weeks ago, I hope those men had spiritual experiences. Spiritual awakening is different. Spiritual experience is a psychic change. I don't mean changing from one psychic to another. I mean a psychic change inside you where you're looking through new eyes, that you see things you've never seen before, where you no longer have to question your relationship with God because you realize that what you've been looking for, you've been looking with, but it's not just fleeting. Something has dramatically changed in you, and often people around you see it before you do. They notice there's something very different about you, and they don't know what that is, but eventually it reveals itself. And if it's a spiritual awakening, you'll continue to grow with it, opposed to a spiritual experience where you had a good feeling with it, you got some great ideas that you can follow up on, and so do follow up on those ideas, and hopefully it will lead you to a spiritual awakening. Let me give you an example through 12-step programs. Okay, I don't speak for 12-step programs, but I'm a big fan of them. And a lot of us in traditional Christianity are very big fans of it because everything that we try to give you in Christian theology is really there. It doesn't matter what they call it. But when someone goes in and they're getting treatment for whether it's alcoholism, drug addiction, sex addiction, gambling addiction, Debtors Anonymous, that's another one that's, you'd be surprised how people can get addicted with trying to feel good through making purchases that they can't afford. I've seen people really get in a lot of trouble doing that, and they have no self-control, not because they don't want to, but because they have a real spiritual issue there. That addiction is a spiritual issue. And emotional and physical. It's not one, it's all three. And there are people who let's take alcoholism. They'll get sober for a while. And they don't do the 12 steps that are recommended in the 12-step program. They just haven't picked up a drink or haven't picked up a drug. And nothing really changes. They had a spiritual experience that told them, I can't do this anymore. It hurts too bad to get well. I'm hurting the people around me. Okay, there's a spiritual experience. But if nothing changes, nothing changes. Now, when they do the 12 steps, I mean all 12 steps, the end result is a spiritual awakening. Not my words. If you read the 12 steps, and I've read them many times, I'm a big fan of them. By the time you get to step 12, it says, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. That means it's not something that might happen. It's something that will happen. It's going to happen. And I watched person after person after person go through this. I had a buddy who was a Jesuit priest. and a very wise man. I loved him very deeply. His name was Father Bill. I won't give his last name. I'll respect that. If he wants to break his anonymity, he can. But I was here listening to him speak one time. And he talked about how his cross he bared was no faith. Went through all the school. It takes about 18 years to become a Jesuit. And he didn't believe a thing. Then, in his own alcoholism, he got sober. And in watching other people get sober with the same element that he had, he saw the miracles that were taking place around him, and he had the spiritual awakening as a result of those steps. And he picked up the book, what they call the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, caressed it and said, "This is my Bible." It's what introduced him to God and took him from a arrangement with God to a relationship with God. That was a spiritual awakening. And I remember looking around, seeing everybody with tears in their eyes because they knew what this man was talking about. So we'll talk more about this after the commercial break. And I hope you get a lot from tonight's show and that you will have some spiritual experience that will lead to spiritual awakening. You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org, www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran-owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to shop in the cool, relaxed comfort of the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands, conveniently located on the I-10 freeway between the Alabama and Tennessee exits. Bring the kids too and watch them play in the only indoor fun center, High Five Indoor Playground, where parents are welcomed on the playground. Birthday celebrations are encouraged, so make plans for some great fun at the mall. More reasons why the Tri-City Center is called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back, friends. You are tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed, and then we're working with a wounded sound engineer tonight, the guy with 3 broken ribs because he doesn't realize Evel Knievel is supposed to ride a motorcycle, not skis. And he was doing some incredible stuff. I got to see the flip he sort of did. And how you feeling, Frank? You feeling it tonight? You look like the Walking Dead. Isn't that how Frankenstein walks after he got all electricity in him and everything? I'm trying to cover time while he's trying to get his microphone plugged in. he's having a heck of a time there, and because his ribs hurt. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling pretty good, Father John. I executed a perfect 3/4 backflip onto my belly off a jump on my skis, and it's a little sore now.
I bet it is. That's a real rib tickler, and I've done belly flops in water, but I've never tried it on the snow. You're a better man than me. So, anyhow. And see, for Frank, that was a spiritual experience. I have no doubt about it. We'll see if it improves his skiing. You'll be a spiritual awakening. I'm sorry, I'm making a victim out of Frank over here, but I really have been worried about him. That broken ribs are very, very painful, and so
I have the video here.
You have the video. I think for those on YouTube, you're about to see what this is going to look like because it's worth seeing. And if there's kids around, I caution you because this is a live catastrophe. You got that lined up now? And here goes Frank. Up, up, and away. Oof. Yeah, there you have, folks. That's why Wide World of Sports got canceled. So, anyhow, I hope that was for those of you who saw the end of that on the GoPro that you saw it eating snow. Goodness gracious. So, anyhow, back to what we're talking about with the spiritual experience and spiritual awakening. You know, you can go through pretty much your entire life and be very religious and attend every church service and never have a spiritual awakening. You may have many spiritual experiences. I'm not putting church down in the least. That's not where I'm coming from with that. There's some people who go to church that have the spiritual awakening. So both can happen there. But it has to happen inside of us. It's not something that happens outside of us. We must become open. Case in point, let's take Mother Mary. When the angel Gabriel came to her, that was a spiritual experience. When she became pregnant with Jesus through the Holy Spirit, that was a spiritual awakening. You know, when she said to that at one point, that surrender, be it done unto me according to your word, that was where the spiritual awakening started taking place. When she got the message, that was a spiritual experience. And it's that serious of something. I think sometimes we hear the word miracle and we don't give it the credence it deserves. You know, we look at it like maybe the parting of the Red Sea, but when we see the miracles around us, it's like watching the parting of the Red Sea over and over and over again. Doesn't mean it's not a miracle. It means that sometimes miracles are happening and we stop paying attention to it. Oh, that's nice. The water opened up. That's, again, going from spiritual experience to spiritual awakening. When the spiritual experiences, you notice, oh, yeah, that's cool. The water opened up. There's a miracle. The spiritual awakening is when you realize the God that made that happen is the God inside me. And we're one. That everything that is created around us, we're created with. You know, it's funny that last 2 years there's been a lot in the news going on about spaceships, UFOs. Where am I going with this? Some people in the Christian church were really worried. What does this do to theology? And I think it's a fabulous thing. Now that people are finding out they weren't crazy for what they saw, that these things really have been happening, what it means to me as a theologian is it shows God is really big and can handle more than just earth. That everything that created is creative of God, so why would that be a bad thing? Why should we be afraid? Because we're afraid of what we don't know. Being ill-informed a lot of times creates fear. We're seeing it in our politics right now, where there's a lot of people running around screaming that the sky is falling. In some places, the sky is falling. I mean, in some areas of what's going on in the political realm. But they've mixed politics with religion and taken the chance of a spiritual awakening completely out of it. Religion that's built around control, and I talk about my church as well in this. I'm not just taking shots at other people. Religion that is about controlling your life can be robbing you of a spiritual awakening. Because how can you have a spiritual awakening when everyone's doing this for you? You're just trying to have a group experience, that aha moment. And I guess that's the best way to put a spiritual experience, is an aha moment. And again, very important. You know, the light comes on. What you do with that aha moment is what may or may not lead to a spiritual awakening. You know, I can remember an experience I had, and I've shared this with you guys before in the past, and so this is nothing new, that at one time I lived 72 miles away from where I worked, And every night on the way into work and on the way home from work, I'd be just all over myself for mistakes I'd made all the way back to when I was 5 years old. Just pulling myself across the grill and, across the coals, and they were hot coals, I'm telling you, until one night I screamed out at the top of my voice, for God's sake, I was just a child, I didn't know better. And that spiritual experience turned into a spiritual awakening, because I realized at that moment who it was that hated my guts. It was me. There was no one else in the car who could be yelling at me. It was me the whole time. But I kept saying, it's this person, it's that person, it's the others, it's the way I was raised. None of that was in my life at the moment. Just me. That's where it can start. Because once I knew where the problem was, I can start moving towards an answer. But if I don't know what the problem is, there's no way I can move towards the answer, because I don't know what I need an answer. And when we find the answer, that's where spiritual awakening takes place, which is beyond the spiritual experience. But the spiritual experience happens first, that we realize the spiritual experience is realizing, hey, there's a problem. And the spiritual awakening is living the answer, not just knowing the answer, living the answer. You know, we can, we can know it's raining outside, and we can know that we have an umbrella, but if we don't open up the umbrella before we go outside, the umbrella did us no good, right? And the same thing with our spiritual growth. We see these things, but if we don't do what we need to do for that spiritual umbrella to open up, we're just staying all wet in the rain, cussing the rain. And the rain's not doing anything to us to begin with. We had an umbrella, we just aren't using it. And the rain doesn't hate us, it's just doing what rain does. It comes down and waters the plants. That's why the next part I want to talk about a little bit sometimes gets a little dicey. When people say that everything that happens was caused by God, well, I'm not saying you can't believe that. I'm saying I don't believe that. Because how I've come to understand God through my spiritual awakenings is that God doesn't put nails in front of people's tires. God doesn't, kill babies to punish somebody else. Do babies die? Yes. Next week I'm doing a funeral for a baby, and my heart's broken. Now, I know the baby's all right because the baby's with God. And it hurts. And it hurts because I know that the parents are going through grief, the grandparents are going through grief. And if you don't feel any of that, well, you're not in touch with your humanity. You can't have a spiritual awakening and not have feelings too. You can't have a spiritual awakening and just worry about how life affects you. Suddenly, you see how life affects other people. Now, do I think God took that baby to punish the parents? Not for a moment. Do I know why God took the baby? No, I don't. No, I don't. I'm not that enlightened. And it may be for some, there may be something that God knows that is a real act of kindness. We see people born with handicaps, or even so, in my case, born into a tragically alcoholic family. Did God do that to me? No, it was just the circumstances. For every positive, there's a negative, and vice versa. It's just the way the universe works. I don't think God put me in there to get, to punish me for anything. What could I have done? I was a baby. And I think sometimes we give God a bad rap. Things happen in life. And they happen randomly. Now, having said that, I do believe God can bring good out of any situation. Okay, that's different. Let me give you an example from the gospel. Jesus is coming because he's been informed that Lazarus is sick. He's deadly ill. And while he was still a ways off, they came to him and said, Master, you don't have to worry. Lazarus has died. And one of the shortest verses in the Bible is when Jesus said when they say Jesus wept, he wept. Now Jesus knew he was capable of raising Lazarus, which he did do. So why did he weep? He wept because he felt the pain of the people coming to him. He wasn't shielded from their pain. Instead, he had what we call empathy. He had compassion. Now, we can have compassion, but empathy is the next level. Compassion means you feel for them. Empathy means you feel with them. Do you get the difference? Feeling for someone, having compassion for somebody is good, and it is very important. Don't undersell that. Empathy, which begins with compassion, but goes a little bit further, means taking on their pain in you as well. What's the purpose of that? So that they're not alone. When you realize they don't need to be preached at, they just need you to be present with them and help shoulder the pain. I wrote something on Facebook, I think it was 2019, and the only reason I'm aware of this is because somebody had clicked share on it today, and it caught my attention. I haven't been on Facebook for a little bit. I've just been busy doing other stuff. And but it said, when someone is in pain, and when someone comes to you in pain, emotional pain, they don't need you to give them your answer or their answer. What they need you to give them is your presence. Do you get what that means? To just be present. Don't preach at them. Just let them know I'm here. I care. And then be quiet. If they want to talk, they'll talk. If they don't want to talk, don't force them to talk. Because you could be standing in the way of their processing. You may be standing in the way of them going through grief to having a spiritual awakening. Sometimes you're the spiritual experience they have when you just sit there with them, with your arm around them. One of my favorite images that someone had done in their artwork that involved them drawing Jesus. There's a drunk sitting on the curb in absolute degradation, and the picture he painted has Jesus sitting right next to him with his arm around him, with his tears too, because he's just loving the guy. That's how I know God. You know, I don't see God as wiping out the drunk because the drunk has a problem. Let me ask you this. When your children get sick, do you damn them for getting sick? If you do, you're sicker than they are. What do? You want to help them get well. You don't yell at them for being sick. You want to know how you can help. You want to love them. You almost wish that you could be sick instead of them. I know my son Jonathan, when he's been sick in the past, I wish I could take the sickness onto myself so he wouldn't have to feel it. And I think God does the same thing. That God sees us in our pain and says, boy, I wish I could feel that instead of them having to feel all this alone. And I think that's why God gave us each other, so that we can represent God to one another and share that pain, hold it together, and be present, to be there. That is a spiritual experience that is so powerful. You can be the spiritual experience that walks into somebody's life and not say a word. You know, you've heard me quote a saying attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, who said to his friars, go out and preach the gospel, and if necessary, use words, or when necessary, use words. The way that we treat people is a walking sermon. And people don't care so much about what we have to say. Half the time we don't hear what each other says anyhow. But we do feel it when somebody really cares. When someone shows up and is absolutely present, not trying to change us, just trying to be with us. That's a powerful spiritual experience. Powerful spiritual experience. And we're at our next commercial break. So we're going to go just about a minute early and You're listening to Viewpoint with Father John. We'll continue this discussion in 90 seconds.
The loss of a loved one is one of the most challenging experiences in a person's life. It's hard to know where to turn to make your loved one's final arrangements. Jesse Ruiz at Personal Funeral Planning in Ontario will treat you and your loved one with the respect you deserve. Jesse served in the Marine Corps in Desert Storm and understands what it takes to provide loyal, personalized, and empathetic service to those who need it most. The families of Michael Jackson, Brittany Murphy, Ed McMahon, and many others have trusted Jesse to provide them with the highest level of service and support. To work with Jesse, call 909-762-4027, 909-762-4027, or visit their website, www.4pfp.org. www.4pfp as in personalfuneralplanning.org. Jesse Ruiz and Personal Funeral Planning, veteran owned and operated, helping you plan a personal, lasting tribute for your loved one. www.4pfp.org.
It's time to shop in the cool, relaxed comfort of the Tri-City Shopping Center in Redlands, conveniently located on the I-10 freeway between the Alabama and Tennessee exits. Bring the kids too and watch them play in the only indoor fun center, High Five Indoor Playground, where parents are welcomed on the playground. Birthday celebrations are encouraged, so make plans for some great fun at the mall. More reasons why the Tri-City Center is called the Mall with a Heart.
And welcome back, friends. You're tuned to NBC Radio, KCAA, 1050 AM, 102.3 FM, 106.5 FM, or you can listen from anywhere around the world at kcaaradio.com. This is Viewpoint with Father John. I am your host, Father John Reed. And a shout out to all the people around the world who have been sending me messages. Thank you so much. I really do pay attention to them. I don't just, sometimes I respond, sometimes I don't, because sometimes I get so many messages that I run out of time to respond to each and every one of them. But I want you to know I take the time to read each and every one of them because you are important. And I appreciate the fact you follow the show, and I appreciate that you share some personal things with me. I mean, some of us in the area I've been privileged to have coffee with from time to time. I've had other people that we went and had a little bit of lunch. And some of you have just spent a little time on the phone with me or on Messenger with me. And that's, I want you to know that that means a lot to me. We have a family here at Viewpoint with Father John, and Frank can tell you that. He's been a part of this family, and he knows that, whether it's Dr. John Smith or myself or some of the guests, that we're serious about this. These aren't platitudes. Without you, there is no show. I don't come here just for my ego. I know it may sometimes seem like that, and it's probably how it got started. I was flattered to be asked to do this show. But I really come here because I'm hoping to give people an experience of real love, of caring love, and hopefully some spiritual experiences, and hopefully here and there a spiritual awakening. But most of all, if you don't get anything else out of this show, I hope you get out the fact that you are enough. God doesn't make junk. And anyone who tells you that you're unworthy is lying to you. You're worthy. And you don't have to be worthy. You see, one of the things that I found to be a spiritual awakening, starting with a spiritual experience, is when I discovered the meaning that grace is a free gift. You can't earn grace. I think it's interesting. We give mixed messages in the Christian faith. Not because we mean to, but we're just doing the best we can. We're just human beings. And we do get some scoundrels. We do. We know that. I'd be lying if I didn't say that was true. But sometimes we give a conflicting message that we say, we're saved by grace, and then we say, but you have to do this, you have to do that, do the other. Well, the moment we say you have to do this, that, or the other, we just took away grace. Because grace doesn't require for you to do anything. It's a free gift. It's not a free gift if you have to do something to earn it, right? So I hope you're hearing this, that you have a spiritual experience in hearing this, and maybe a spiritual awakening, that God already loves you. You're enough. You're good enough. And you're not even required to be. It's a gift. And what God is wanting is for each and every one of us to know that God loves us. I don't believe in a God that says he only loves people from a particular religion. I think that's really a poor sales job in who God is. That's who we are. We like to have our societies, and we're better than you are, and yada yada yada. But that's our ego, and ego spelled out as an acronym is edging God out. Because I cannot worship my ego and worship God at the same time. And many times in my life, I thought I was really doing something good, and it turns out it was ego-driven. But God could use that for good as well. God is not lacking in talent and creativeness. I hear all the time, and I'm guilty of saying it myself. There's nothing new under the sun. And that's just not true. Every breath of air is brand new. No two snowflakes are alike. We know that scientifically. So if there's nothing new under the sun, then that's impossible. And when we study quantum physics, we discover how that's just not true. New things are being created all the time. Did you know parts of the universe are still being created? It's expanding. So if there's nothing new under the sun, how could that be happening? It's happening. Rejoice in it. It doesn't make our religion smaller. It doesn't discount our religion. It endorses the religion that says God is big and God is big enough and God continues to grow. I think we have a fixation of God. And one of the things I find with people that keeps them from having a spiritual awakening is we have God in a box. And if we never take God out of that box, we never have the awakening. We just say, here's my package of God. This is how God has to be in this form, has to be in this church, in this chapel, whatever it is, this campsite. And if we never take the idea of God out of the box and let it unfold, there's your spiritual awakening. God unfolding in your presence. All we have is God in a box. It's nice in case we ever need God, right? If I really need God, I'll pull it out from here when I really need an answer. And you're not bad for that. It's kind of how we've taught it. And I'm sorry, again, we're human beings doing the best we can, and sometimes we try to pretend to know things we don't know yet. Look, I remember when I first was ordained, oh my God, I was really dangerous. I mean that sincerely. God knows how many people I turned off from God because I was trying so hard to do it right. And someone had come to my church one time and said to the person who brought him to the church, "I'll never come back. That man has a mean streak." I didn't know it. My parishioner didn't know it, but this other guy saw it. And it struck me cold. Why would he say that? And so I started doing some investigation. I had some anger issues that I hadn't dealt with. I had some grief issues I hadn't dealt with. Yeah, I had a mean streak in there. I covered it well. But with my comedy, I sure can lash people down. And, people have seen me do it, and everyone's laughing while the other person's in pieces. That's a mean streak. That's not who I want to be or how I want to be. But in order to solve a problem, you have to first know what the problem is. And that person was my Eskimo. We use the story of an Eskimo, a lot of us, where we talk about we're lost in a snowstorm up in Alaska, and we can't see 2 feet in front of us. And we're certain we're going to die because we're out of supplies, we have nothing left, and suddenly this arm reaches through the fog, grabs us, and pulls us to safety. It's an Eskimo taking us out there. Well, this person was my Eskimo. I was lost in my own pain, didn't know it, and this guy saying what he said cleared the fog up a little bit and brought me into safety, and I'm a better priest for it. I'm a better person for it. And I don't even know the person's name, but if you're that person, you're listening, thank you. You helped me have a spiritual awakening. I was awakened to I was broken in this area and needed spiritual healing. We always have areas where we need spiritual healing. I don't think we ever arrive to a place. It's just God's kind enough that we don't have to deal with everything in the same day. You know, I deal with this thing, and then I get a little rest for a little while, and the next thing comes up and says, okay, we took care of that. Let's close the book on it. Now you're ready for me to help you heal in this area. You know, it took me many years to know how to be healthy in a love relationship. I like to pretend it's not true, but it is true. You know, it took me many years to know how to be a real friend, not just an associate. You know, because I know how to be nice to people, but it's hard for me to let people in. That's always been a problem. I went through a new awareness a few weeks ago. Regarding the retreat, someone had offered to drive me to the retreat and to bring me home. They were going to the retreat anyhow. And when they first offered, I said no. My ego, and I'm not supposed to be driving those distances anymore. It's not that bad, but it's about 60 miles away, and that's further than the doctors like for me to be driving by myself. But it's getting better, because within 15 minutes, I called the guy back and said, if the offer's still good, I'd like to take you up on it. And I was able to let go and let this guy drive me to the retreat. We had a great retreat, and drive me back home. That may seem real simple to some of you. That was a major spiritual awakening for me, because I've always been the self-sufficient Irishman. If it needs to be done, I'll do it myself. And these illnesses I'm dealing with are really gifts from God, because they're causing me to open up and let people in, and turning spiritual experiences into spiritual awakenings. I love being there for other people. And I was talking to a friend of mine. We were emailing back and forth, and he was both shocked and pleased that I was going to let my other friend drive me. And he said something to me. He's a very wise doctor, and he's my surgeon from when my neck was broken. He said, you really enjoy helping people. You get a lot of joy out of that. Why don't you let someone else have that joy too? And until he said that, it never crossed my mind that I was depriving somebody of joy. What I see is I'm being a burden to somebody. Any of you identify with that? That when somebody wants to help, I'm happy to help them, but when they want to help me, my head says, what my ego says, and again, ego is edging God out. These are all children of the ego. Is that I'm being a burden, and I'm not worthy of that kind of consideration. So see, brothers and sisters, I still have areas I have to grow. I still have more spiritual awakenings I have to have, and they start with the spiritual experience. The spiritual experience was when my friend offered. And the awakening started when I said, okay, but the real awakening took place when I actually followed through with the action and allowed myself to be driven to the place, be driven home. And that was tough. I had to do a lot of letting go of control. And, those of us in the priesthood, a lot of us really have control issues. And I certainly include myself in saying that. And sometimes it's so subtle, we don't even notice it. We're just being a service. Just being a service. And so the awakening is when I see, okay, that wasn't so much being a service as me taking control of a situation and being in charge. I had somebody on I think it was Instagram a few weeks back, and talking about me being an ego maniac because I want to be on the radio, and without anything, I typed back, well, you're right. I wouldn't be on radio if I didn't have an ego. Of course I want to be heard by the audience. Of course it's important to me that people tune in, And where the spiritual awakening was when I was able to say that and not damn myself for it. But instead say, okay, this is okay. It's all right to have these feelings. It's okay to be aware that I have an ego, that I can be arrogant. And a friend of mine was talking one time, and he had said, as he's talking about his life experience to these people, he said, one of my flaws is I tend to be very arrogant. And after the guy's talk, someone came up really mad at him and said, you're really arrogant. And he was being very serious. And my friend Tom said, well, I told you that when I was speaking. I know I'm arrogant. It's just part of how I am. And when I'm able to catch it, that's a blessing. When I'm not able to catch it, I miss the blessing. That simple. But I don't hate myself because I have a problem with being arrogant. There's the awakening. He doesn't hate himself for being who he is and having these things that he needs to grow through. He realizes it's part of being alive. So again, if you don't take anything else from this show tonight, take this. You're enough. It's okay to have, shortcomings. We all have shortcomings. We all have defects of character. The same thing, by the way, just different words. That's okay, as long as we don't let them run our lives. As long as we're willing for that to be fixed in us. As long as we're willing to let God use these things the way God would. I used to get so mad at myself, particularly with my humor. A lot of you know I have a real warped sense of humor. And sometimes I'd go home and I'd just be really angry with myself because I think, God, I shouldn't have said what I said because, I represent the priesthood, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. There's the ego again, by the way. And then one guy said to me, he was sharing about his experience with me. They're throwing a little roast kind of a thing, which is kind of nice. And he said, I've always had a fear of priests. And then I met Father John. He was telling this really inappropriate joke. It was really awful. And for the first time, I was not afraid of a priest. I realized that he was human like I am, and I was able to become his friend. Yeah, I felt welcomed by it. Now, if my ego had taken over and I better never say something like that again, I would have deprived that guy. Instead of letting God use these things the way God would. I don't think God gave me a great sense of humor just for me to stifle it. I had great fun the days when I did professional comedy. It was a good time. And yes, every once in a while I do get called to do a gig. I why, I don't know, but I guess they still think some of the stuff's funny. But the thing is, I don't damn myself for it anymore. And when I was talking about earlier, when I first was ordained, I was always damning myself. Until a little Irish woman, Margaret Brennan, came up to me, and I've shared this story on the air many times. And I continue to share it because this was one of my great spiritual awakenings. When she said, what happened to the John I used to know and love? The guy who was funny, who was fun to be around. She says, now you're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly value, and you're just a walking encyclopedia of useless information. You become a horse's butt. I cleaned that up. And I was hurt deeply. And she saved my life and saved my priesthood. Because I forgot how to have fun. True spirituality includes fun. A healthy person can do three things. I know I'm in my last couple minutes here, but a healthy person can do three things. A healthy person can work. A healthy person can play. And a healthy person can love. And if you're doing all three things in the same day, on that day you're very healthy. And I hope that this episode tonight, this show tonight, this segment, got you a little closer, if you're having trouble living on all three planes, a little closer to doing it, to working, being able to work well, being able to play well, and being able to love well. You do these things. You have a lot to offer other people who don't know that those are the three signs of good health. And never trust a spiritual director that's afraid to laugh. Because if they're afraid to laugh, they haven't found the joy of God yet. That's not a put down. It's said with great compassion, because I've been there. And I pray for their ability to be able to laugh. Well, I think we're coming pretty close to the end here. I guess I have 2 minutes. I can get the 2-minute warning. I feel like I'm playing football. You know, I'm speaking this Sunday somewhere, and once you know it, I'm going to miss Super Bowl. Good Lord. Now, I wonder if they picked me to be a speaker at this organization because they knew there'd be very few people there on that day. They'll be watching Super Bowl. So I don't know if it's a compliment or just saying it like it is, like, you only heard a few people while you're up there. So, look, it comes down to this, and I mean it. I love you. And as much as I love you, God loves you even more. And God isn't in your life for you to feel guilty or to feel ashamed. God is in your life for you to feel God and to know that God made you because God first thought of you with love. And if you can wake up to that, that's the greatest spiritual awakening you can ever have. And I pray for you to have that awakening of spiritual love. You've been listening to Viewpoint with Father John. If no one told you this week that they love you, let me be the you first. And I look forward to being with you in 2 weeks. Next week we're taking a break where we'll have a rerun, but it might be a really good rerun. So make sure you tune in for that and be good to one another. We'll be back soon. God bless.